guess that was his word, so.
Years has, so
Yeah.
that finally came through. And it's-
So their grant, I mean, it's available for 2016, 17, marketing made for that? Are there funds available?
There's all kinds of grants, and then we get emailed to us all the time. Matter of fact, PSBA just sent us something that they put a brand new grant website together. So I did a STEM search the other day, and there's STEM cell stuff and STEM, so, you know, we'll continue to look at them. We'll continue to, I think that's something we've done pretty well, over $300,000 in grants this year, so we'll continue to look at those every year. I mean, as those come in, as those we see opportunities, obviously, and that's a big area. I mean, a lot of companies and corporations are funding those things. There's strings attached to them, but you can get the, if it's out there, we'll do our best to write them with the limited resources we have, so.
The room to get it ready, what,
203?
yeah, what kind of structure?
Right now, it's a computer lab.
Yeah, there's just, there's a counter that goes around the outside walls that the computers are sitting on. It's nothing, I mean, there's nothing permanent in there other than that countertop and some tables in the middle. So to clean it out and put tables and get it ready should be minimal.
With the electric and all
It's
that?
all there.
That's all, that was all done during the electric, when they rewired the building, yes,
It's a
it's,
computer lab now, so there's,
yeah.
I was just thinking
Yeah.
those 3D printers could probably use a lot of power.
Yeah, regular plug.
Is it? Just 110?
Yeah, and it is wired, around the room has all electrical plugs, so.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Ellen.
that's all I have. Again, I mean, I'll go back to my first slide. Like, again, it's a budget with possibilities and opportunities. It could be a budget of just balanced budget. We don't do anything new. We cut everything and don't rehire anybody and go back to the minimal. But again, it's that guns and butter. You know, as I was looking at the budget and looking at opportunities, and as we talked, you know, that thought came into mind, you know. Yeah, we do need the basic stuff. We do need the reading and math, the reading, writing, arithmetic. You always need those. That's what we're judged on, the SPP scores, the PSSA testing, which is a whole other animal. But then again, you look at areas that we have, you look at things that we're doing now, look at other school districts, what they're doing. Do we want to provide those opportunities and enrichment? And that's the butter part. So again, I guess my homework for you and Rich's will be to look at that presentation, questions, thoughts. Again, we're going to meet next Wednesday, and I'll kind of turn it over to Rich right now to go over some things, correct?
Yeah, well, I don't really have a lot unless you want to go through the detailed book. The idea that Joe and I talked about, though, was to kind of send it home. This is the presentation I've made every year. I go object code by object code, and I make small notes about what the major changes are. So if you wanted to go through that now, we can. If you want to just wait and hold off until next week, we can do that. That'll give you a chance to kind of put some questions together. What I will give you is the pink sheet. I tried to include this in the book, but somehow it got overlooked. This is the same presentation that Joe kind of put together with regards to where we are. And I'm going to start at the top and just kind of go back over it again. Total estimated expenditures as of today were at $27.9 million. I backed out the $450,000 budgetary reserve because that's money that is there so we don't overspend the budget. It's for unanticipated expenses. It's not something that we actually have to fund. We fund that with fund balance every year, so it's not part of the, again, the actual expenses. I did some preliminary revenue work, and it came up with $26,167,000. Again, I kind of need some direction as to what you think you want to see revenue-wise. Whether you want all the state money in, no state money in, half the state money in, because that'll make kind of a big difference. And then the other number that I pulled out was the $350,000, thinking that that's a one-shot deal. You know, we only have to do that this year, then that expense will not return next year, so I guess you could pull it out if you didn't want to do the HVAC project, but Again, it's not something we experience year to year. So where that brings us down to is a $959,000 deficit as of today. And then below that, I've listed everything that is in the budget. And Joe went through most of it through his presentation, if not all of it. So I guess what we did last year was we went item by item and said, yeah, we want that in, no, we don't want that in. So that's kind of what we would like to accomplish for next week, is to tell me what you want in, what you want out. And we don't have to do that tonight, we can do that on Wednesday of next week if that's how you want to proceed.
President, I'd like the administration prepared, could at least have a recommendation on those items for us?
For next week.
Yeah. Thank you.
I don't think they'd show up on the pink page like they were in the recommended.
Why do we need new risers?
They're 30 years old. I've got some pictures of bolts pulling away from fiberglass, so.
I thought they were made out of wood.
A lot of them are fiberglass, but there's bolts that don't even, they're pulled right through.
So we're talking like when the oral presentations, what the kids stand on.
Yes.
If you have any questions on any of those items that I can answer now?
I just have one in your book, I'm sorry.
Sure.
You have substitute salaries eliminated, placed with Kelly Services. Kelly Services hasn't had enough teachers, so how would the teachers that we call to fill in the gaps from Kelly, how would they get paid?
Get paid directly through payroll.
And what I mean, what line item would it come out with if we got rid of line 122?
Well, I guess what I did was I kind of looked at this as the big picture. So I have enough money to cover the subs. I didn't really get too particular about putting in the sub account. I just wanted to make sure that I could see big picture, so I pulled it off. Why don't
Okay,
just
I was a
go-
little confused.
Let me go through this real quick, just so that you kind of have, so starting with page 1,
Sorry.
you can see where there's quite a bit of salary that has been taken out in the 111 object code. That's because we don't have the assistant to the superintendent at this point in time. That salary came out. We pulled out the severance package for the former superintendent, so that's a reduction. One increase you'll see there is I do have some money in there as we go through negotiations to try to protect myself, not knowing what's going to happen as we get down the road. Then I did pull all the substitute salaries out of the 122. Those are in object code 329 now, which is a purchase of professional service. And then really not much else happened on that first page of too much consequence. I do have additional work that I'm going to have to do on the athletics and activities. Again, through negotiations, not 100% sure where to go with it, but I'll come up with some kind of a solution for it. Page 2, personal care aides, that's really just a transfer. $22,891 was taken out of the 131 object code and included in the 191. 191 instructional aides, which is line 21 of that page, is a fairly large increase, and that's because we added in that particular spot the 2 new aides for the autistic and LSS class. We added a Title I aide, and then it is a transfer of the personal care aide down to the 191 object code. So that's why that looks so dramatic. Custodial maintenance salaries, there's a reduction there. We had not an extra person, but I had a person that we were paying that was out on sick leave for quite a bit of last year, who has now retired. So those salaries go down. And custodial subs, we just can't get them. So we reduced the amount of money that we put in the budget for custodial subs, again, realizing that they're hard to come by. So when it's all said and done, salary accounts have gone down 181,000. Again, that's a bit misleading because a big portion of that are the substitute salaries that were pulled out of there. On to the third page, which is the 200 object codes. These are the benefits. Small increase in life insurance, and that's predominantly for retirees that have come off of the early retirement incentive. That's about $450 a person, so 3 or 4 of them had come off in the previous year. Social Security has gone down because, again, we're not paying substitute teachers to payroll anymore. You will notice though the retirement line went up $471,000. So that's an increase from the 21.4% this year to 25.84% next year. Tuition reimbursement, that's just historical, so there's a reduction there, as is the unemployment compensation. Most of our unemployment was substitute teachers. So with those people gone, no longer on our rolls, we have less exposure. Workers' compensation is up a bit at this point. I am receiving quotes, but again, that's based on salary and that's based on loss experience. We're going to see a slight increase in salaries, and our loss experience, unfortunately, has not been that good. Medical insurance, small increase, $76,300. That's a 2.75 increase on our premium, which really is pretty good compared to what others are paying in the industry. And then again, not much else really happening on that page. Flipping over to the next page, which is the 300 area, these are purchased professional services. The second line, which is line 35, you can see a decrease of almost $200,000 for professional educational services, and that is in direct relationship to us taking over a class. So instead of paying the intermediate unit $44,000 a kid, we'll be paying a teacher, an aide, and a nurse. And then the other number of note is the 182,590 for professional education services purchase. That's the Kelly services now. Remember, they have a $10,000 increase in line 330, which basically, a big part of that, quite honestly, is the drug testing. We just got a new contract. It's costing us about $1,700 or $1,800 to test 15 people 4 times a year. And then with workers' compensation, those people, before they come back, people that have been out on family medical leave, they all get tested. So our costs continue to inch up for the drug testing that we do. And then I guess the last number I would mention is line 41 for safety and security services. I guess I over budgeted last year because I had people coming in some parts of June and July, and obviously they weren't here doing security on Saturday during the summer months, so I was able to reduce that number just a little bit. Moving on to the next page, 400 object codes. I look at electricity over the last several years, and I feel that we can reduce our budget by $18,000. And I guess while I'm mentioning that, I mean, I have tried to put this budget together. I've always said over the years and told the board that I budget to exposure, which means that when I see a number that I think we can get to, that's the number I budgeted to. I've now cut that out. So we're no longer budgeting to exposure. We're budgeting to, we hope this number comes through. I don't know how else to explain it, but I mean, it's not that I had fat, but we recovered. So now we've kind of gone to where, things could happen that aren't so good. So hopefully, though, the numbers I've put, I've tried to be credible with them. And I've not tried to undershoot anything, but I tried to put just where we're going to finish up. 430 repairs, that would reflect the sanding of the gymnasium floor, the small gym. The $350,000 in object code 431, that reflects the HVAC project. Then I go down to 438, which is a reduction of $18,898. That is a reflection of us moving to Tyler. So we don't have as many maintenance agreements, or maintenance that we're going to be paying Harris and ProSoft. I guess the other one that I would mention, rental of equipment, that's actually copiers. We pay per click. We are using monitoring software, so that's kind of cut down on the number of copies that we were making on our machines, so I was able to reduce that budget just a tiny bit. Down to 448, that represents the lease. That $32,000 was the telephone lease last year. It's now in another spot in the budget, so we are adding $43,100 for a new lease, again, 4 years. And I guess what I'd like to do, at least get a head nod today, that I can at least put RFP out for the lease prices, because they need to come back. If we're going to go forward with it, then we need to be able to get the money, and it takes a month to settle a lease. So Ellen's going to need time to get all these new computers, if we get them imaged and ready for the teachers. So if it's okay, I'll put something out, at least starting to get pricing back to get a lease in place. And then construction services under object 450, that is the $74,000 for the removal of the carpet and replacement with an alternative flooring, and $33,000 for the Harry parking lot and playground. We get into the next page, which is the 500 object codes. Contracted bus carriers, there's an increase there based on contract. It's a 2% increase this year. I budgeted according to the number of buses we're using this year. We were right on the money, I think, unless something happens between now and the end of the year with what we have on the road, so we should be in pretty good shape there. The insurances, again, I'm receiving quotes on those, but I did increase it 5% overall based on the recommendation of the agent that we use. And I'd also point out on object code 529, other insurance, for some reason the board E&O dramatically was reduced through Liberty Mutual. So I'm kind of hoping that carries forward again this year, assuming that it did. Excuse me, I did take some money out. Going down to tuition 561, that's tuition to Laurel. The agricultural program is a little less expensive than what I had previously budgeted, so I was able to remove $5,000. Cyber school tuition, that's 52 kids, based on an average cost of about $10,829. If the governor gets his way, we could get some huge relief there, because where we're paying now $9,000 and $19,000 for regular and special ed students, he has proposed a straight rate of, I think, $5,920 per student, regular ed, special ed. So that $563,000 could be dramatically reduced if in fact the governor's proposal comes through. Tuition to private school, a little bit scary here, in that we had one student that we were paying close to $70,000 for, moved to Seneca Valley, I should say, moved out of district. We have some other kids that we're bringing back, so again, I'm not budgeting to exposure anymore, I'm budgeting to exactly what we have this year in hopes that nobody moves in that's going to require additional services. Tuition to VOTEC, I don't need to correct, but I think the number I'm budgeting to is 94, which is what VOTEC gave me. And they gave me a number of $12,500 per kid, so that's what that number reflects. That's why the increase is $140,000. Alternative ed programs, we had 6 kids in Cray last year budgeted. I think we're budgeting 5 this year. And then travel, I've kind of looked across the board where we've not spent money over the years. I've just taken it out. And then really that's all the major stuff on that page. Going over to 600. General supplies, although it's a reduction, there are some things in there that justify the reduction. Number one, we had 11,000 security cameras last year, $6,100 in band room chairs, and we eliminated some foresight test supplies. So that allowed us to increase some stuff but still have a reduction. And what's included in that number is the $10,000 for the north side ceramic for the walls and the window blinds over at north side. General supplies, testing, I think we're going to be asking students now to pay a portion of the AP test, so I was able to reduce that number by $3,000. Again, the administrative software, that again relates to a transition to Tyler Technologies. Natural gas, we just signed a new contract through October 2017. You may recall we did that at a board meeting where there was a pretty nice reduction in what our per decatherm cost is, so I reduced that number accordingly. Diesel and gasoline, we do have 8 vans in addition to the 18.5 buses on the road, so that's not a reflection of a price increase, but just of additional miles being driven on an annual basis. The $112,950 is in there for the K through 4 reading adoption. And educational software, that's really related to one Adobe software package that we'll be buying for the business ed department. The equipment, we've kind of talked about all of this on Mr. Mancini's presentation, and again, all of it is listed on the pink sheet, so I won't spend really time reading it to you again, but that's what those numbers on that page are reflected in the pink sheet. It's all detailed out. The next page is the 800. This is where we get into our interest on our bonds and so forth. And I mean, the major number to talk about there is that the interest on our serial bonds has gone down almost $77,000, which you'll see on the next page, but the principal payment goes up. So, you know, as you pay off the principal, your interest payments go down, but the principal does go up. And that's what reflects on the final page where the 900s are, where our principal payment did go up almost $65,000. The lease payment for the telephone is also reflected there, $22,541. So that very quickly, and I apologize for that, gives us a total as of today of $27,926,689, an increase of $938,000. What I'll be working on between now and our next meeting is I'll really try to refine all of this, double check, make sure that I feel like I'm accurate. I'll be working on the revenue projections, and then we'll be working on the athletic budget. I don't expect the athletic budget to have any real major impact on the general fund budget, but Dooney and I, maybe Mr. Lake will sit down and go through all of that to make sure that we have adequate funds there. Bids for the athletics are due May 1st, so things could change a tiny bit between May 1st and the final budget presentation, depending on how bids come in and the supplies and so forth for the various sports events. That's it. Unless there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Just one, if I could go back to,
Sure.
500,
All right.
564, the tuition is, okay.
Uh-huh.
That number they gave you, the 12.5 per
Yes, sir.
student, is that reflecting their loan for their high-vac unit?
No. No,
That number may go up,
the HVAC, or the,
the average cost per student,
oh, is that right?
How can it do that?
Well, I mean,
well, because of their budget.
yeah,
There's an increase on their budget, they passed the budget last week.
okay.
I'm not exactly sure what that number is, but.
I gave you that.
Oh,
We had a meeting.
Okay, so
We had a
okay.
meeting with all the superintendents, we went through this whole budget. I gave it, I think it reflected,
Okay.
I think that's the number,
Okay.
you use
Oh,
that
I'm
number.
sorry, I didn't look at it, Joe, I had it
Oh,
on,
okay.
so
I just wanted to make sure we had the
I'll
right
go
number.
back and, thanks for letting me know that, I'll go back and get
Make
through
sure we
that.
had the right number.
He went through that whole thing with us.
You had your meeting
Friday.
the day after the budget was passed. Protect budget was passed, but I was doing it out there.
Okay, I'll definitely.
I'm not saying it's different, I just want to make sure you're aware.
I just hadn't even
I
got.
handed him a folder, he was,
Okay, if you got it on Friday, that should be the right number.
yeah.
Okay.
How can it go up if each school, member school, was required to pay for the HVAC? How could they have additional?
I don't think you're saying the HVAC will go up, I think you're saying the per student cost would go up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The HVAC, yeah.
Yeah, the HV didn't go up.
Okay.
The addition to the budget that actually raised the cost of student tuition. It's their overall budget.
Yeah, I think I might have the right number then, because an email that I got from
Okay. I'm
Mary
sure you
said
did.
that,
Now that I know that Joe got it on Friday, I'm sure you have it right.
yeah.
Yeah.
We'll adjust, if an adjustment's needed, we'll go ahead and take care of it.
Otherwise, I apologize, I had to step out.
We're still saying it's on 12,000.
12,000 for the boat tag? Well, I think if anything, it's 12.5 is what I've
12.5.
used here. It
Okay.
could go up if I've got the incorrect number.
No, I think I was,
Okay.
want to point that out. So I apologize, I had to step out and fix this. This is the administration's recommendation on everything we need to have. Let's be clear.
This is what's on the list.
Okay, all right, so make sure I, thank you.
You're saying, you said the athletic budget is the only thing that's missing right now?
Well, it's incorporated, the numbers are here, they're in here, but there may be an adjustment for whether the supply, like when the supply bids come back, there may be a number that needs adjusted. I don't see it as anything that's going to be too major. So for example, the football budget last year, let's say, was $20,000. He might have a budget that he has to have, could be $20,500 or $21,000. So I don't see major adjustments. I just see that when the bids come back, there could be tiny little things that will change.
Joe, you know that this doesn't list the teacher for the lab?
That has, well.
It has the teachers all
yeah.
being replaced, but it doesn't have the stuff.
Just one of those replacing all 4 teachers. One will be in the lab, one will be, yeah. I just put them as the old positions.
Okay.
So I guess, just kind of soak all this in, take all this information home with you. I know it's a lot to digest over one day. April 29th, we'll come back with our recommendations, I guess, which is this, and we'll haggle. But we just thought we'd do a little bit differently, give you an overall general, get some details. You have an idea, presentation, you got details, you got a slip deck, one page that kind of gives you all the one page, and go from there.
Rich, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Have you heard yet what the gambling revenue for the taxes?
I'm gonna assume, you shouldn't assume, but I'm gonna assume it's the same $690,000 that we've gotten over the last several years. Now, again, there's a proposal out there, again, under the governor's budget to dramatically cut property taxes. And he's gonna, but that's got to increase the personal income tax, you got to increase the sales tax, and you got to put the gas tax on the, Marcellus Shale. So that's all got to happen before we get to any other kind of tax reductions.
I was in Harrisburg yesterday and talked to several of our elected officials, and they said it's not gonna happen.
Yeah. And I also don't think it's going to happen by June 30th either.
It would be,
They said that
realistic
too.
as August.
Yeah.
He was very optimistic.
Well, they went back to the one individual that I was talking to, referenced a few years ago, in October or something, he said it could be another one of those years. He goes, we quit getting paid, and that's when the incentive is to really start moving. They'd stop getting paid at the end of June, right? At the end of
I think there's some legislation out there, though, that will allow them to continue hold harmless, so that they can continue to provide subsidy at the current levels for the districts. I guess they actually have to legislate that, or we can get paid either.
It happened before where they, after June 30th districts, they would fund them to their current levels. So,
Well, there's, go ahead. No, go ahead, I was gonna start a new topic.
In this budget that we're looking at now, it's already including the new class, the autistic support life skills class, so that's already moving forward in the budget, that savings that will come in, that hiring of those 3 positions, correct? Okay, so that's all in here already. The changing of the PE teacher, is it possible to, instead of replacing, like, the phys ed teacher getting different kind of classes in there, for example?
electives, like
Well,
weightlifting or,
something like that.
we do have an advanced PE right now.
But like, we have the Zoomathon coming on, and that's the first thing I thought. The girls would love to have some kind of a class like that. Bringing in maybe an instructor instead of a teacher that can fill in, maybe they teach X amount of classes. I don't even know if you're allowed
Yeah,
to do something like
the
that.
PSEA union stuff, it's like an outside contractor almost. They would, like, if they would say you need that class, you should hire a teacher. It's
Okay.
kind of like us maybe creating an SEIU position or bringing somebody in to do something, they would say, well, if you need somebody to do that, like the union contract, you would need to create the position. So, I mean, they probably do aerobic stuff and Zumba stuff during the class,
Uh-huh.
pickleball and all the things that they do. It's not just a full Zumba for months. I mean,
Is it, well, no, of course not. You'd have to do something then for the guys.
you mean like a
weightlifting.
specialist? Yeah.
Just something more, something more
They
specific.
do gym classes. I mean, they do golf, they do.
It's a good segue into this. I asked Joe, after our conversation at the last meeting, we were talking about electives and what's offered. We also had the conversation about study halls, which there seemed to have been some confusion. Do you want to explain the whole study hall routine?
We have one study hall per period at the high school. Years ago, we didn't have any. And that's when we, if you remember, That's right when I got here, 16 years ago, we started the process to go to block scheduling. We hired numerous amounts of teachers to cover that, because to have block, you're on semester classes and blocks, and we were blocking the English and social studies classes. So we increased the amount of teachers in those two areas to provide that, and I think Mr. Lake was hired when that happened, as a social studies teacher, way back when. And then when the block was dropped, we went back to the 8-period day, singleton classes, with 28 credits. As people retired, remember we used to have in-school suspension. And not only do we need teachers to, teach your classes, but we also had, we used to have a special ed resource room. We had study hall, we had, cafeteria duty, lunch duty. We used to have in-school suspension where it was covered by teachers. As teachers retired and we didn't replace, we kind of eliminated some of those things. We went to Saturday school, got rid of the 9 periods that we needed people to cover. And as we dropped credits, we went from, I believe, 28 credits down, we're down to 25. We offered study halls now instead. We offer 1 study hall per period for students that need to take it. We don't have, like when I went to high school, we don't have the cafeteria, auditorium, study halls that, they're maximum 30 kids in a classroom. So we don't have the huge, 100 kids, 150 kids in a study hall in the cafeteria. That's not how it's designed. It's just a, catch-all for kids who don't want to take a class, or they want a study hall in their class, in their schedule, because they have a full load and they want a period to just not do anything, or just read, or study, or do their work. Those are options. So that's where we're at right now. We have 1 study hall per period, which is covered by a teacher. Anything to add to that? I don't know.
No, like Mr. Mancini said, the concept of study hall has changed dramatically. So, even when I sat in the study hall, there was in the auditorium. We had 70 or 80 people in there, possibly 2 teachers covering it. We only had 1 study hall per period. And then most, I think, we squeezed maybe 28 bodies into a particular class.
Down the road, some of the kids that are in study hall, with the future of what's becoming with the project-based assessment, and then having to have kids remediate by law when they don't pass the Keystone test, we got to by law remediate them. They're going to have a study hall. They're going to go into a remediation class. They're going to go into a project-based class. Then now they have to take the project to graduate. So as this gets going down the road, where this becomes the graduation requirement for the class of 2017, these kids' schedules are going to change dramatically if they don't pass the Keystones. Because by law, we've got to do these things.
Starting with next year.
Next semester.
The class of 2017 is currently in 10th grade. A lot of the students took the algebra Keystone already in 9th. And we're down to X amount that will retake it again as a 10th grader this year. And when those scores come back to us July 1st or around that time, if they still haven't scored proficient or advanced, then as an 11th grader, they're going to lose an elective or a study hall, whatever's currently in their schedule, and they're going to be in a project-based algebra class that's required to get that diploma. So those are other things, and that's just for algebra. The following year, we're going to have to worry about bio and lit if anybody doesn't pass it. So those are some things that are going to take some space in their schedule as well.
Do you have the teachers to cover?
Right now, if we had this in the budget for next year for the algebra kids, we will contract through the IU who will actually run the class. And when you do it that way, you can have any certified teacher in the room with them. You wouldn't need a specific math teacher to do algebra. You wouldn't need a bio teacher to do bio. You wouldn't need the lit teacher to do lit. You could have a teacher that has a available period as their duty now to be in a room where there's a bank of computers and everything's online and everything housed at the IU, and that teacher's there just as a facilitator, somebody look over their shoulder, make sure that they're working. Right now, I think what's the requirement, 30 hours. They have to complete a project that's 30 hours.
What about the remediation, like for the?
Remediation right now, I worked in this past year, we had remediation for algebra during the first semester. I was able to use 2 math teachers that had periods available and 1 science teacher, my physics teacher, who has math on her certificate, and I used her for a period. So I had 3 periods for algebra remediation this
There was
past
that
year.
many,
Well, I didn't want to overload them. I had 15 in the class. We had 45.
45 out of how many, do you remember? How many?
Well, whatever the class 2017 currently is, maybe 140, 150.
We had 45.
And we've got that number down to in the 30s. If we get another crop of kids to get through the Keystone next month, I'm hoping to get that under 30, which is a manageable number for the project then.
The IU's doing is they're providing an opportunity for all the schools in the IU, because they know resources are limited with this whole thing. So they're providing that they would be the facilitator of this. They would provide the teacher of record. So we don't have to have a biology teacher do it, a math teacher do it, or a lit teacher do it. They're providing that for a fee, where we just provide the space and have somebody there to monitor. It could be a
And it has to be
teacher
done
that
during
has-
the school day. It
That's
can't
the
be done
project.
Can't be
at
done.
off hours. Can't be done after school, before school. Has to be done here during the school
I
day.
think there's a different login every day.
Yes,
That's the way
to
that
make
it
sure.
works. So the kid, like, it's not one login that they go home and log in. Like, when they come back to log in, they get a new login.
And that's what the facilitator would be in correspondence with the IU. Okay, Jim, here's your
That they don't
login.
do it all at once. Yes.
So they're not, or
Yeah.
somebody else isn't doing it
Right.
at a different time.
Well, we were talking about the electives as part of the conversation that we had about senior privilege. So Mr. Mancini put this together.
Actually, Mr. Lake and I.
Mr. Lake and I, sorry.
Don't worry about
Not give you the credit.
That's all right.
But this is a pretty interesting list of electives that are available per period for next year's schedule. So you can see the number of course offerings that are out there. This other handout,
That's what he originally, he'll, in whatever, February, the tallies, those are the tallies.
Yeah.
February, students will go online on Edline, and they'll pick what classes, he gave me those a while ago, course tallies.
It's on my computer.
No. You sent those to me for some reason, I don't know why, but I had them. But like, kids will go online at Edline, and they'll say, I want to take this, 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 and this. He kicks out a number, Mr. Lake gets that number, and then he builds the classes and the electives, and number of course requirements that, that are out there, and he will build it based on that. So if you have 3 kids that want to take a class, and you kind of eliminate that, so it's a whole process. It's kind of like the budget. It's a big Jenga piece. Building a master schedule at the high school for, 900 kids, 7 through 12 especially, that's the process. So the tallies, build the schedule, kids then go in and schedule, and then what Mr. Lake's been doing, as I told Mr. Newpower, walked by him the other day, and he had a kid sitting there individually. Every kid that has a conflict or a hole or an issue with their schedule, he calls them down, says, hey, you got a conflict, you wanted to take this period, you can't take it this period, let's kind of move your schedule around, so you take the class this period, now you gotta pick an elective, here's what's available, bing bang, his schedule's done for 15, 16. So he's going through that process now, calling down every kid individually who has an issue or a conflict in some way with their schedule, to fix it. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, or?
No, I mean, the scheduling process is really close to being completed for 15, 16. And I'll just say this, that process has changed over the years. And I know Mr. Keeley has done the same in the elementary. What we do the last week of school, I think, is another thing that separates us from other schools. I don't know if you remember the last day of school for you every year, but I considered it was chaos sometimes, where the last day of school, kids are walking the hall, this and that. If you walk through our halls the last day of school here, I think it's better than the first day of school, because kids get their schedule for next year, they follow it, and I will walk through the halls and won't get one disruption, won't hear any disruptions, because they're in those classes listening to the teachers that they're gonna have next school year. And it's just been a great transition that we've done. And it's a lot of work in April and May, while you're also PSA testing and Keystone testing and getting ready for commencement and prom and all those types of things. But it's worthwhile in the long run. And the other thing it does is You remember day one when you started school and you had 50 people lined outside the guidance office trying to change your schedule? Well, all that's done, because now they know their schedule, and they have that time during the summer to come in and schedule any scheduling changes. So what you have in front of you, I mean, we start that way back in January, and it's just finishing up, and like I said, I'm just going through it now and just fine tuning some things, and then I'll go ahead and put the teacher duties in next, and the teachers will have their schedule before they leave as well. So I think it's pretty streamlined. We have it down to a process and a science, and it looks pretty good for next year, as long as we replace all the positions that we currently have. If we don't, then that throws a big monkey wrench into things. But
You know, the other thing we talked about on the phone the other day was about the dual enrollment, as well as these off-the-wall electives that we offer to kids through cyber, or through the internet.
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier in my presentation, dual enrollment's changed also, just because the money, the funding of it. I mean, it was awesome when that first started, and we were getting funding from the state, and we were getting $50,000, I think, to pay for dual enrollment. Kids were taking college classes for free. They were walking out of here 15, 12 credits through BC3. When that, budget cuts happened, and that was one of the first things to go, now the burden's on the parent. I don't know what a BC3 class is right now, $450. So that's why, that $99,000, we may want to earmark $20,000 of it towards dual enrollment to help offset the cost for kids that want to do it. Maybe not the full cost, but hey, it costs you $250 instead of $450. So that's dwindled. I mean, it's an issue that Ellwood City, the parent, the money may not be there for parents to afford that. So we've had a drop in numbers of kids taking dual enrollment classes, and BC3 won't offer them, or we won't offer them, but they won't run them unless you have 10 kids in the class.
and currently, right now, we have 3 college classes on the books for next year that we're offering. College English, which is pretty much English writing, your freshman writing class. We have 5 that have initially enrolled. Our history class, we're at 6, and our college psych is at 9. Those are going to be in jeopardy. They might permit the 9, the 5 and the 6 one. If that doesn't get, if that's not increased, they're probably going to come back to us and say, you can't teach it. So we might be stuck with 1 college class next year.
So then what, and that's part of SPP too now. I mean, we're judged on dual enrollment classes. That's one little piece of this school performance profile is, how many dual enrollment classes you offer. If you don't offer any, you get 0 points out of 2.5 or whatever it might be. AP dual enrollment, college classes. So we offer them. They're there. Kids can take them. It's just that the funding has dropped. So that's affected. And that's pretty much
personally, AP, the difference, I would personally recommend a college dual enrollment class before an AP class, because you're guaranteed the credit. You pass the college class, you pay the $450 up front, you take the class, you pass it, now you have 3 BC3 credits that probably are going to transfer pretty much anywhere you go. You take the AP class, if you don't score a 4 or 5, which the national average is 2.8, so, just looking at averages, it's tough to get a 4 or 5. Colleges aren't going to accept those credits, but we have more kids taking AP classes than we do dual enrollment, because the parents have to put up $450.
Well, that's an interesting segue into the question I wanted to ask is, how is that communicated to parents? I mean, if they knew what you just said, a lot of them might push their students to go that direction to get the credit.
I'll be honest with you, and a lot of that is communicated through our GIEP meetings, because we do have certain requirements for AP, and not 100%, but in most cases, the students that are eligible to take AP classes are our GIP students. So that's one way, and that's face-to-face in a meeting. I will say this, the other way, the non-GIP students, that maybe we need to look at how we educate the parents there. We do tell students that, and it might be in the course catalog. I'm not going to hold myself to that, but there might be some type of earmark explanation in the course catalog when we give that to the students to take home for the parents. But you could be right there, Mr. Newpart. It might be something we need to look at and do a better job at. But most of the kids that are the GIP students that are in those classes, I always make that statement at those meetings.
Now, the $450 that they get charged, that's the regular price for a credit?
BC 3 credits, or 3 credits, they get 3 credits.
3 credits for
Yes.
$450.
Correct.
What's a credit cost at like a IUP or a Clarion?
I don't have that here. I know that through Beaver County Community College, I think they use Penn State, and I think that's pushing $1,000 for 3 credits.
I think it's more.
It might be more than that. It's not the 450.
It's
The
1200
BC3 is,
or something like that.
BC3 is the cheapest rate you're getting. Mr. Mancini went up to Votech to listen to YSU, mainly because
They're trying to
Coach Tressel was there.
push it.
Yeah.
That's what I-
No, but they're trying to push their way into this market also, because they end up with a lot of kids from the 3-county area that end up, and they give them in-state tuition. So they're trying to push their way in, so their pricing is a lot cheaper, but there's a lot more loopholes because they're not a state university. So I got an email the other day, like follow up, and if we would be willing to commit, you know, to put a committee together, things that we didn't have to do with BC3. BC3 made it, our it's nice about BC3 is that it's our teachers that are
Yes.
certified that teach them here.
And others offer it, other colleges offer, maybe a Clarion or something, but that might be online. The kids just flat out, it's a normal class. They come here first period, they go, and it's our teachers. Mr. Kemmer for college psych, boom, they go right to his classroom, 207, and it's no different than taking another class.
I would
So,
imagine the teachers like that, it gives them a little bit of a different.
They're always asking me for more, and I said, I would give you more. And Mr. Mancini said it, I remember when Mrs. Weimer was here teaching speech. She was one of our first dual
College
enrollment.
speech.
We had at least three sections that she was teaching college speech. And those were packed, maybe 20 kids per section. So you're looking at
Free.
50, 60, they're free,
Yeah.
you know?
That's a
So,
required class,
what's that?
and it's a required class.
Yeah, everybody has to take it, you're right.
Back then, yeah.
The other
That
thing
was
that,
the college one, too.
just to point out that Mr. Mancini gave to you, our elective choices, you know, I don't want to stir up a hornet's nest, but with the senior privilege, since you guys had some questions, once again, I don't want to get the mindset that we're not offering things. Things are offered. The whole thing going back to senior privilege, like I said, is one, obviously, it's a parent's decision. And then two, when we did our arena scheduling, after the seniors schedule, and Mr. Mancini came up one day, and then Mr. Keeley's son even said it when he came home, he verbalized it to me. Typically, when we got to 9th graders, they came up and they pretty much had to redo their whole schedule. It wasn't until probably the last 60, 70, 8th graders that are gonna be 9th graders where we really ran into difficulties scheduling kids and pretty much telling kids, well, this is what you have to take 4th period. And those classes were open because students that were seniors that had their credits and chose senior privilege weren't taking seats from others. You might look at it a different way, I look at it as a positive way, and that's the way I see it. And like I said, it's not like we're not offering, if you look at that elective per period, the hard periods to schedule electives are around lunch, because teachers have to eat. And that's where, in a schedule, if you look at 6 periods, like Mr. Lake, there's nothing available 6th period, you're right, teachers have to eat, so I mass load the schedule with 2 world cultures classes, 2 English classes if I have to. So anybody taking a class 6 period, they're in their core classes those periods. So that's just something to add to what he gave.
Mr. Lake, senior privilege isn't reducing our electives that we offer.
No, not at all.
Just by seniors choosing not to take them, it frees them up for other students.
Correct. And if we make some
Well,
changes down the road with certain things like STEM, then those kids that are taking classes in 9th and 10th grade, they'll have those, hopefully, opportunities to add something else to it in 10th and 11th.
I'd like to chime in as a parent. My son came home and he didn't like to talk about school anymore than any other kid. But he got to elect his electives instead of, well, that's all that's left, I guess I gotta take that. So his electives really were electives this year, and he's really excited about those.
Thank you.
And I will say this, I think, and it is my prediction, but I think it'll hold water. This will be the highest year that we'll have senior privilege. reasons we just gave. Because the students that do not score proficient or advanced on Keystone exams are gonna be forced into projects classes. So I think this year will probably be our highest year for senior privilege, and we'll see a decrease in it because they're gonna be required to stay to finish those project classes. So I look at it as a 1 year, here's our ceiling, and then from there on out, those numbers will decrease. We'll still have it, like we still have work release.
Any questions, comments from the board?
I still don't like it. Sorry, I think we're here to teach, and we should be teaching, and they shouldn't be getting out. If they're working, that's fine, if not, but that's my opinion.
You know, one of the things that we discussed was, you know, if parents knew, and I think I mentioned you on the phone, my daughter the other day, who's 9th grade this year, going into the sophomore, she was like, Dad, what's the senior privilege about? And I told her, and she was like, oh, great, I'm taking the first 2 periods off and sleeping in. And I'm like, oh, great, here we go. But, you know, I wonder if parents knew that, you know, there were opportunities for some college credit, that whenever they bring that permission slip home with those parents, they'll say, well, wait a minute, you know, let's get you into something that's productive instead of, like my daughter, sleeping in and trying to go in late, go and take an extra class if it would be available.
I mean, come senior year, she may not have an opportunity because the class that she has to take or wants to take is, might be first or second period. So it's just all building that schedule around, you know, what they
Right,
need.
if it's first or second period, then
Let's
they
say-
can't sleep in.
Correct, correct, so.
And the other thing too, like we said before, the students that are truly concerned about class rank, this does not apply to them.
And I realize that. I mean, it's the kids that are aggressive and proactive are going to be loading their schedule up anyway. But yeah, I think the concern with some of the board members was, you know, those maybe underachieving kids were letting them off the hook and they're dropping off the radar whenever maybe they need something that to help them if they do choose to go on to college. But, you know, like you said, with some of these new programs, you know, it isn't gonna be next year, but if, with that whole different, line of classes through that STEM, keeping kids excited, the sky's the limit on doing some, extra things like that. Might be different. All right, anything else before we call it quits?
See you next Wednesday.
All right. Next Wednesday, 7 o'clock.
7 o'clock.
How's Hawaii?
Wonderful.
Ready to go back?
Next week. I live over here if I could. Yeah.
That's the latest.
Blue plate special.
Blue plate special.
You have a pen for me, or what?
Yeah, I
A lot
do.
of money to go.
No, I just
The
have to
first day
find.
I was there, I got the shock.
It has to be blue?
No,
Her and I got 2 fish
well, better,
sandwiches.
no, I don't think so.
78 bucks.
This pen
Are you
Bob gave
kidding?
me.
Yeah.
Fish sandwiches?
Fish
Wow.
sandwich.
I like it.
Breakfast was
I use it
$28
myself.
a piece every day.
Broke one.
Was that at the hotel, or was those little places that you found?
No, right on the beach.
Yeah, because everything has to be imported. over there.
This is for the,
$28
Wayne Township Deputy Tax.
And I didn't get out of dinner for less than 100 a night.
Wow.
Yeah.